Welcome back to the Digital Ledger, everybody. I'm Brad Kimes. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe on this channel. This is a new channel that we're doing here that is a little bit different. We will do nothing but crypto and XRP on this channel. No live shows, only pre-recorded video, and it will be chock full of fresh content, no duplicate content whatsoever. So make sure you hit the like and subscribe. Today we're going to talk about a very important subject, which is what will happen to the price of XRP if Ripple goes public, which they said they intend to do. So sooner or later this is going to happen. This is a response from Darren Winston, a cryptocurrency analyst. Now let's hear what he has to say and break this down, because he goes over quite a few things here, and I want to touch base on them after we read them. It's a read, but let me tell you, it's worth it, and I want to get into this. So, okay, we could start right here. When it comes to XRP, there are different scenarios that may happen. Some are lower probability, while others high probability. I'm going to zero in one scenario for purposes of today's article. Ripple goes public. There are so many cryptocurrencies that the people do not tend to pay much attention to. Investing in these cryptocurrencies would bring about maximum profits, and also would bring less worries in fluctuations of their prices, as they have really stable prices. Cryptocurrencies like Ripple, Monero, Dash, Binance Coin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Litecoin, Ethereum, and so many more can be invested on the platform LibraForex.io, where you get from 25% to 100% ROI on whatever is invested. Silicon Valley has plenty of examples of how much money can be raised from an initial public offering. Examples stretch back to the 90s and the early 2000s, during the golden age of technology and internet IPOs. What is an IPO? If you're completely new to financial topics, initial public offering is what that is. So I'm going to keep going here so we don't have to read that. Capital gushes during an IPO, despite the fact that Ripple raises money from their software revenue and sales of XRP. Both of these are no comparison to the amount of cash that would be raised by an initial public offering for the company. In my estimation, Ripple's IPO should be viewed equivalently to, let's say, Uber, because Ripple's business use case should be just as wide-ranging in terms of market. While Uber claims its total addressable market is $12 trillion based on entering the new markets like mobility, food delivery, and freight shipping, Ripple's market share should also be very sizable share of the remittance and payment market, including P2P, replacement of Nostro Vostro accounts, and B2C and B2B payments. But perhaps it's better to look at a collection of IPOs to get a sense of the capital raised. Uber raised $8 billion, Facebook $16 billion, Visa $18 billion, TradeWeb $1 billion, Advantor Performance $4 billion. Where would Ripple end up in terms of money raised? The analysts and underwriters involved will normally set an IPO price that is loosely, some would say very loosely, based on fundamental business factors of the underlying company. In the case of Ripple, I think of its valuation based on a combination of its future total addressable market, with an eye towards payment processing, software micropayments, tokenization, payment streaming, smart contracts. In addition, the analysts would need to account for Ripple's ownership interest in potentially dozens of other companies as part of the Spring Initiative. In short, Ripple's IPO would be sizable. I'd say that it should be judged equivalently to Visa or greater, but to be conservative, we should probably judge a future IPO as an average of the above list minus a specific percentage. The math, the average of all the mentioned IPOs is $9.4 billion. Well, recently Ripple had a valuation of $10 billion. So let's assume Ripple was conservatively pull in half of the number in capital of $4.7 billion, roughly $5 billion cash. That's a lot of cash. And this amount purposely excludes the market value that would be related to the value of XRP that Ripple holds. I imagine that the IPO marketers would attempt to include that in the price, but we will ignore it during our analysis. What could Ripple do with $5 billion? Well, for one thing, a massive influx of capital would sometimes create unanticipated outcomes. Unexpected wealth could prompt some executives to retire or scale back their work. Usually, however, this influx of capital from an IPO is used by the company to expand and achieve far greater levels of growth that they would otherwise would. Thus far, Ripple has been able to access capital from its consulting revenue, software sales, and licensing, and its sales of XRP from its treasury. But these sources don't compare to what an IPO could provide. Here's an interesting comparison. All Ripple sales of XRP ever, $1.1 billion. Possible IPO cash influx, $5 billion. As you can see, an IPO would dwarf what Ripple is able to do on its own through sales of XRP. Not only that, but the fact that Ripple is able to sell XRP might actually increase its IPO price. The world of high finance can yield some surprising possibilities. An IPO future, so what would a post-IPO future look like for Ripple and XRP holders? Well, for starters, life would be more annoying for Ripple. The money and cash from an IPO has strings attached, and mainly, they take the form of enhanced reporting requirements for the company. Quarterly reports must be prepared. Official audits must be conducted. Financial statements must be reviewed and published. And the post-IPO company is almost always held to a more strenuous measure of accountability by its shareholders than a private company. So there will be a cost and many annoyances to the executive team at Ripple. What about XRP? A public company would be faced with the same dilemmas that a private Ripple is. However, one key difference is the level of financing and credit than a private company, and many have more options to raise cash than merely to increase sales of either services or XRP. So I think XRP programmatic sales would either decline or cease entirely. I think wholesale sales of XRP to banks and market makers would continue. However, because that involves directly growing the network of RippleNet member institutions that utilize XRP, selling XRP to these participants is not only expected but necessary. Programmatic sales are not. Next level marketing, one very positive aspect of having a pile cash from an IPO would be to spend it on things that grow the market value of either the company or XRP. Unlike all of the companies quoted in this article as an example of an IPO, none have had a digital asset that comprises billions of dollars of value. Great point. Currently, Ripple is not speaking a lot about XRP or its ability to grow XRP's value because they're in an ongoing legal matter, both lawsuits and regulatory questions that necessitate a more circumspect communication strategy. Once these legal outcomes are etched in stone, the company may see fit to ramp up its marketing. After all, there's nothing prohibiting a company, whether public or private, from promoting the ownership of an item in their inventory, right? And this marketing might be phenomenal. With $5 billion, no amount of potential marketing is out of reach, and the days of the Super Bowl advertisements about digital assets may be upon us. To date, the only participants in the crypto market that have engaged mainstream advertising and its participants have been the exchanges, and they may make money no matter if the market goes up or down. My favorite ad so far is the Cryptonaires advertisement for eToro. Just imagine if Ripple could afford to hire him for XRP-related promotions in a post-IPO, post-legal issues world. Even now, we can see clearly that Ripple has an appetite for acquisitions. Back when Ripple first hired Ron Will, I thought it was a sign that the company was telegraphing its intention to go public sooner rather than later. I was wrong. What became clearly apparent was Ripple was more interested in acquiring other companies rather than attempting to create curb appeal prior to an IPO. This is great news as it speaks to even greater levels of confidence by Ripple executive team than even I have foreseen. They had clearly mapped out a strategy to acquire companies represented by any possible missing pieces to their market rollout of software and services. They acquired portions of companies through Spring, although for the most part, these ownership levels are kept private through non-disclosure agreements. And of course, they purchased a chunk of MoneyGram in exchange for ownership interest in that company, along with the transformation of MoneyGram's payment flows to include usage of XRP as a bridge asset. One thing is for certain, if Ripple has an opportunity to make more deals to integrate the use of XRP, they will do it. Not only that, but because the cost savings have allowed MoneyGram to survive and thrive, My guess is that other remittance processors will be wanting to go the same route and use XRP for settlement. In short, an IPO would enable Ripple to make dozens of more deals in short order. The amount of free publicity surrounding an IPO is substantial. While some part of the process is certainly paid for and is formal part of an IPO marketing strategy, another measurable part is unplanned and taking place with the mainstream media outlets providing their unscripted opinions about the event. Even without an IPO, Ripple has received a large amount of publicity due to the leadership role as the largest private blockchain technology-related business in the United States. I've lost track of how many times news outlets have interviewed Chris Larsen, Brad Garlinghouse, David Schwartz, and others. With an IPO, the company would receive even more free coverage leading up to its offering. Orders of magnitude, when I think of what Ripple would do with increased amount of capital, it's reflective of the same type of things they're doing today, only on a greater scale and with much larger results. Ripple is sponsoring educational programs with UBRI, funding XRP-related businesses with Spring, making major businesses to expand XRP ecosystem, engaging with government and political leaders. These results thus far have been amazing. Ripple is a company that does a lot with very little, and when you think about it, it's not that they do a lot of the additional new activities, but they ramp up the existing plans with huge amounts of capital. Now, one of the goals of an IPO is to achieve the highest possible company valuation prior to the offering. If Ripple waits until pending lawsuits have been settled, it may enhance their ability to achieve a higher than average IPO share price. In addition, an IPO necessarily distracts Ripple executive and broad staff during times of industry turmoil or change. A private company is able to devote all of its resources to problem solving and business tasks. A public company has to manage its image, prepare financial statements, interface to thousands of public stockholders. Essentially, Ripple's ability to be nimble would decrease with an IPO before and after. Most of us, especially readers of this blog, own some amount of XRP. From our perspective, a Ripple IPO is good news. It allows the company to continue incredible work they're already doing, and it eases the pressure off of programmatic sales. If they need additional levels of capital, it provides the company with more options using credit if it needs to. And the results they've already achieved could be considerable, enhanced by immediate infusions of billions of dollars. While reporting requirements are annoying for the company, my guess is that they're probably willing to pay the price if it means accelerating the adoption of their payments processing software and its preferred digital asset. Now, this is really, I think, a great article. However, I do take issue with the this scenario that goes to zero. What I would suggest here is simply this, is that I think the IPO itself tells us exactly what we're dealing with. Ripple is a blockchain infrastructure company. Just like Chevron is a manufacturing company. They process. They're a processor, right? They pull oil out of the ground and they process that oil and then send it off. So it's not actually manufacturing, right? They actually process the oil. So truthfully, I see it the same way. We've heard Brad Garlinghouse, we've heard Chris Larsen say this and use this analogy, and I think it's completely relevant here. And I don't think that you would see the sales drop off. Now he's talking about programmatic sales, and basically retail sales is what he's really hinting to here. So what I would suggest here is that the real value is derived from the commercial sales, the institutional use, the banking use, right? All of these things that Ripple has been working on to really build the infrastructure, the market infrastructure to, whether it's by acquisition of a company or whether it's by building the payment rails and the necessary framework and market infrastructure to allow those institutions or banks to be able to use their software and, by default, eventually the asset XRP. I do, however, believe that the flywheel theory comes into play here. When you talk about programmatic sales either ceasing or declining, you could certainly in the IPO process possibly see a halt to the trading of XRP temporarily. I mean, now that's an extreme that he's not actually covering here, but I think you could actually make an argument for that if you wanted to, a temporary halt in trading, just like sometimes you see in the precious metals market. With that being said, there's many scenarios that could happen here. The other thing that I would suggest too is that, with programmatic sales, you may see a situation where they dwindle. Because if you really understand the flywheel theory and what happens to XRP, we have yet to see the competition come into the same corridors with MoneyGram using XRP for settlement. And the moment that we do, this is just one example, but the moment that we do, the flywheel theory begins, because the competition will begin buying and buying back the XRP off of the exchanges, because they know it will never be as cheap as it was yesterday or the moment you're in. The same scenario happens. Bob Wade discussed this also on my other channel, Investment Perspectives. When two banks begin to use and settle with XRP, that's all it's going to take, because then the flywheel theory will kick in. And because you have those two banks using the XRP, all the other banks will have no choice but to get that same cost savings, efficiency, and immediate settlement time with the security and the scalability and the interoperability of the new digital financial payment system. All right, guys, I thought this was a really great article. Shout out to Darren Winston for this. I really do think it was a good perspective. I don't agree with the go to zero scenario, but I do agree that over time, I think you will see the retail sales or programmatic sales diminish, just because I believe once the flywheel theory starts and the actual use begins with competition in each area of industry and different corridors of remittance, I believe you will see the price of it shoot up very quickly. And when it does, IPO or no IPO, it gets harder to buy. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. And I think it's also an important note to remember as well, Ripple has 6 billion XRP, but they don't own and control all the XRP. It's decentralized in a cryptographically locked escrow account. And I believe that a good portion of that account is pre-allocated and escrowed out to a lot of people. And I believe whatever is in remainder is to be held back for monetary policy over the next several decades. And I also firmly believe that whoever is going to control that remainder in the escrow that isn't pre-allocated is not going to be Ripple, the blockchain infrastructure company. I believe it'll be a governance or possibly PolySign, a third party for sure, that will oversee the rest and remaining of the escrow. All right, that's going to do it for me, guys. Hit the like and subscribe. If you like the content, please share it. Let's get this channel growing really quickly. Always quick, fresh content, never duplicate, and no live streams. Hit the like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.